Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deirdre Hughes. Delighted that you're able to join us today, and perhaps depending on whichever part of the world you're in, it might be early morning or indeed evening. Wherever you are, we're delighted that you're here to join us today for our fourth in the series of Career Chat live lockdown webinar sessions. Today's topic, Youth Transitions, Creating Pathways to Success. I'm delighted to be joined by Rachael Fitzpatrick, Research Officer from Education Development Trust, a charity based in Reading in the UK, and Rachael will say more about her work very shortly. And of course, the co-author of Youth Transitions, Creating Pathways to Success, Graeme Smith, Research and Evaluation Executive from Skills Development Scotland. Today, if I just begin by doing a few very quick housekeeping rules, and then I'll say a little bit about the aim of today's session. So just housekeeping really, just to ask you to turn off your video or your microphone if you're not speaking. It just helps with the connectivity. Secondly, just to say it will be an interactive session, so we'll have some icebreakers and a few activities and polls for you to share your views with us. And around midway in the presentation and towards the end, there'll also be a chance for you to put your hand up if you wish to speak, and we will do our very best to bring you into the conversation. So just simply put your hand up if you do want to speak at any point. You should be able to see the little hand sign like that to the right hand side of your screen. Do make really good use of the chat facility. You'll see again the chat is there, and I'm just having a quick look. Wonderful. Liz Rees says hello from the beautiful Malvern Hills in the UK, and lots of people from different parts of the UK and indeed further afield. So if you haven't said hello yet, why not try out that chat facility? So today's session, really, the aim of the webinar is very much to stimulate ideas, really, amongst interested parties, your good selves, along with ourselves as researchers, to sort of think about this topic of youth transitions. And we hear so much around the doom and gloom of what's likely to happen in terms of youth unemployment, that what we want to do is really to focus very much on the how can we best create pathways to success, indeed, for young people. And just before I came online, I just checked out the Office for National Statistics here in the UK. And, you know, it is a grim reality that between March and May of this year, certainly when the lockdown began, there's been 109% increase in youth unemployment. So we mustn't dumb down in any way the challenge that lies ahead. But we as a team of researchers, along with other interested parties, are really keen to see what options are available and how we might be able to tackle this particular issue. So the structure of the session, I'm going to hand over to Rachael, who's going to say a few words in a minute about the rationale for why did EDT ask for this evidence-based international think piece to be produced. And at the end of the session, you'll all get a copy of the link to the full report. So we're going to actually whet your appetite with what's in the report, so that hopefully it'll spur you on to want to find out more. We're going to look at the challenges that exist, not just here in the UK, but indeed further afield. You'll have an opportunity to think about what are the opportunities available for young people, and to think about global perspectives, not just the sort of Western society perspective, but indeed what's happening indeed further afield as well. Fundamentally, Graeme and I have had lots of discussions around this idea of spaces and places for young people. And we want to share with you the sort of framework that we've been developing and some of the ideas that we have, but we hope to hear from you about your ideas as well. And then we'll be moving on to sort of think about, well, where next? What happens next? So just by way of a little icebreaker before I hand over to Rachael, I would really like you to think about when you were 16, You were young. I'm sure you were either very handsome or very beautiful then. But what did you want to be when you were 16? Could you just use the chat facility and just type in what that memory was like? I'm getting a few things on chat here. Saying no sound, the sound is cut out, but then I'm getting others who are able to hear. So I'm going to leave Mark and Robert, the technical team, to have a look at that. But it looks like there's quite a few people: stuntman, fashion designer, teacher, nurse, no idea, stuntman a few times, archaeologists, didn't know, actor, lawyer, not sure, banking, teacher, fashion designer, anything to do with art, football player, vet, air hostess. Let's just test out Graeme's sound here. Graeme, what did you want to be when you were 16?
I wanted to be a footballer, and I still do want to be a footballer. I'm holding out for my footballing career to develop. So, can you hear me okay?
Can hear you fine. Yeah, right. So, fantastic. You've still got that dream. And what about you, Rachael?
I wanted to be a teacher when I was 16. I still might be a teacher. I don't know.
Right. Okay. So, but I think what's brilliant about this, when I think about my own sort of experience, you know, I began thinking I'd like to be a detective. I think probably spent too much time watching TV and Columbo at the time. But in all honesty, I didn't really know. And I think I didn't know until I was about 26, where my curiosity lay. And in essence, it took me a while to get a series of exposure to an experience of work to sift and sort out what I might like to do. So I think, in essence, where we're at the moment in terms of youth transitions, you'll see in the evidence report how young people have got high aspirations. And I guess for all of us as a community of interest, what unites us is our passion and our belief that we have to find ways of creating pathways to success, not just for a few, but indeed for all young people, regardless of their circumstance. So let me hand over to Rachael, who'll say a little bit now about Education Development Trust and the new report that we're launching today. And you will get a copy of the report, as I said.
Thanks, Deirdre. So I'm just going to be brief and just say a little bit about our interest in employability and careers. So I am a member of the research team, but we do have a dedicated careers team who work in the employability and careers space. So they deliver national careers service in multiple locations across England. And we've also got careers guidance in schools and a variety of kind of internationally focused consultancy and practice services as well. So we're very much looking outward beyond the UK too. So we commissioned this piece really as our kind of growing interest in employability and careers. But as you can see on screen, we do have a variety of kind of areas that we look into for research. So we recently published a piece on teacher management in refugee settings in Ethiopia, for example. But in recent years, we've been developing a research program that's focused specifically on employability and careers. So the first of those publications was very much a foundational piece, and we decide the focus of what this research is going to be with the careers delivery team. So it's very much a collaborative effort between the research team and those working directly in careers spaces. So we chose labour market information as being a foundational topic. That would be our first piece in the programme. So this new piece on transitions very much kind of fits into that kind of forward-thinking vision of trying to kind of adapt to the kind of needs in this area for evidence gaps. But we had to pivot slightly because Deirdre and Graeme started work and then COVID happened. So then we had to think, you know, beyond. It's created such a huge challenge for young people and for everybody, the situation with COVID, with uncertainties around the economy. As Deirdre's already mentioned, in the UK alone, youth unemployment's skyrocketed. And even for people in a relatively privileged position, young people might be going into workplaces that look very different to what they'd imagined as well, which might be quite daunting. I mean, I'm in quite a privileged position, but just here, my desk is a toddler's kitchen, toy kitchen, and I'm sat in a toddler's chair doing this. But I'm in quite a privileged position in that I have a quiet space where I can work. So there's lots of things that youth at the moment might be thinking about and be scared of. So we really wanted to help either continue a conversation or start a conversation about youth transitions. So on that note, I'll hand back to Deirdre to talk you through the report.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Rachel. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. And of course, I should have said we have an absent friend today, Anna Rachael, who is head of research. Rachael works very closely with her. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to join us today, but Rachael has been a real star in stepping in and actually working very closely with us and getting the final report over the finishing line. So we're really, really grateful for that. So really what we want to do next really is to get into the meaty part of what does the report contain. And I'm not going to cover everything that's in the report itself, but just to sort of by way of introduction, we're going to do a poll now in a second. You might see that Rachel's left the room. She's now joining as an attendee so that we can bring in someone from the audience who wants to speak at some point. So remember, you can put your hand up to speak if you want to. So let's begin with basically, all of us know that we're in what the Institute or the International Labour Organization call a triple shock for youth. You know, the pandemic is inflicting this triple shock. Not only is it destroying their employment, but disrupting education and training and placing major obstacles in the way of those seeking entry to the labour market or indeed moving between jobs. And if you're a parent of a teenager at the moment, actually, you may well be very worried about future prospects and indeed where your son or your daughter can get really good support when it comes to making decisions about this. And I suppose if we can just introduce our first poll to you, we're just keen, given we have a global audience, to just ask in the poll, hopefully you can see it, do you think governments are doing enough to support young people post-pandemic? We could say during and post-pandemic. This is really just a temperature check, because we know at the moment that lots of governments worldwide are actually announcing various packages and intentions. And I'm going to share some of those intentions in terms of what's happening in the UK and particularly in England. And Graeme will say a little bit about what's happening in Scotland. So it does look as though from the results, there's still quite a bit that needs to be done around us finding our way forward and some really, really good results there, policies and practices. Now, I'm part of a European network called CareersNet, and CareersNet is managed by Sedefop in Thessalonica, which brings together what they call country experts in lifelong guidance. And really, these are a combination of policymakers, researchers, and in some cases, practitioners. And I just wanted, by way of introduction, just to say that, you know, what we're seeing at the moment rapid responses around technology. For example, Estonia as a country has actually made available its entire suite of EdTech products free of charge to any country in the world. And I've given a link there so that you can have a look at that, because youth transitions are sort of part of that. We're seeing lots of dialogue and lots of new developments around gamification, personalization and adaptive learning and immersive technologies. And in particular, I think in our report, what we will highlight and demonstrate to you that whilst digital advancements have got to be embraced and are highly relevant for some individuals, that actually digital solutions alone are not going to solve the challenges that actually lay ahead. But they're part of the picture, and we would like to tell you more about what we found in that particular context. So let's have a sort of think about the young people and those who are actually in that transition phase, whether it's between schooling, whether it's leaving schooling, whether it's actually leaving further education or indeed higher education. Now, the first thing that I want to say in the research that we have done is that actually young people have high aspirations and ambitions for their futures. Many are overwhelmingly positive about change. And I think that's a really important point to hold on to, because whilst there is hope, then I think we can see a way forward around opportunities to support young people. And if you look at the World Skills report this year, you'll actually see lots of evidence of that. But in our report, you'll find that with all of that positivity, that actually this is juxtaposed with evidence of inequalities in life chances and living standards in places as diverse as in India, in the Middle East, in North Africa, and in Greece. Many young people struggle with what's often described as waithood. And we think that that term is actually quite a useful term for us to sort of think about in this context, particularly in the UK, but indeed further afield, that if we're in a situation of our youth and this generation being in a state of waithood, then what are they waiting for? And also, how can we create pathways for them that will actually help them to flourish and survive? Now, I'm just going to go to the next slide, and then I'm going to hand over to Graeme. But Kelly Smith has said, I think the private school versus state school divide is going to widen as a result of educational provision during the pandemic, and this is a worry. I think this is a really good point that Kelly has made. And I would go on to say that in our research, of course, one cannot ignore what's been happening with youth, and in particular the Black Lives Matters movement, that many young people are actually coming out, as it were, around the inequalities that they see happening in their society. And actually 71 million unemployed young people worldwide, and 156 unemployed young workers are living below the poverty line, as it were. That's sort of defined as sort of less than $3 a day in some cases. What we've found is that public education spending, actually public spending in education favours children from the richest households, the poorest living sort of less than 10% of public education resources. And recently I led a research programme in the city of Derby. And what we discovered in the city of Derby was that the schools that were actually getting the most money in terms of careers and enterprise support were the schools that the head teachers themselves would send their children to, whereas other schools actually in more disadvantaged areas were indeed getting less. And I dare say that's not a unique set of circumstances. So in the context of our work, we've got to find these ways of actually the most disadvantaged children and young people who are less likely to receive education and career support need opportunities to develop their skills to adapt and to prosper. And so I'm going to hand over to Graeme, who's going to tell you a little bit about what's happening in Scotland in just a second. And before I do, I'm just going to finish really by saying that mental health and concerns about young people's well-being cannot be ignored at the present time, and that these new pathways to success are really really need it. Maybe just to keep the interactive flow going, Graeme, if you don't mind, before I hand over, let me just ask our audience to complete another poll. Do you think this year's school and college leavers will become the forgotten generation? Share with us what you think. You just see lots of fluctuation going on in the polls there. Maybe around 50% of you think no, around the sort of low 30s. I think it's encouraging to hear that, it's not an overwhelmingly yes, they'll be forgotten. And I guess because you're here today means that you won't let them be forgotten. And so I think what we'd like to do is to sort of think about what can be done to address some of these challenges. Here in the UK, data published just last week shows that since lockdown began, apprenticeship starts between sort of March and May of this year. There were around 26,000 apprenticeship starts compared to this time last year, where it was actually circa 50,000, a fall of about 47.9%. So it's an awful lot of work to be done. And I think based on that sort of context, let me take you to Graeme, and then I'm going to bring you back to England. Let's have the Celts go first. Over to Graeme. Around Graeme, what's Scotland doing in terms of transitions?
Thanks very much, Deirdre. I'm going to try and speak as slowly as I can because I do appreciate that I've got an accent and not everybody can understand what I'm saying. So if I'm speaking too fast, please just let me know. So my name is Graeme. I work for Skills Development Scotland, and we are the National Skills Agency for Scotland, which is funded by the Scottish Government. So we work across a variety of areas, and our main purpose is to support the people and businesses of Scotland to develop and apply their skills with a kind of overarching aim of improving the economy and also the wider society. So in terms of supporting young people transitioning from school to work, we do this in a variety of ways. So one of the first things I want to kind of talk to you about is our careers information, advice and guidance services. So we are Skills Development Scotland are responsible for delivering the CIAG services in Scotland. We have careers advisors working in every school across Scotland, and we use a targeted approach. So we identify young people in schools who we think need the most support, and they're given a kind of more intense coaching relationship with a careers advisor. But also young people who maybe don't need as much support, they are still able to access careers advisors in school. So it's very much an all-inclusive career service. We also have advisors operating from a network of high streets across Scotland. So I think we've got a careers centre on every high street across the country. And this is for post-school young people who can access this support once they've left, if they need to. So we're very much trying to capture all different kind of circumstances and situations. We also, in terms of the school leavers, we also have a Next Steps 16 plus service offer, which really is to ensure that young people who leave school who are maybe not in a positive destination, they have additional support that they can access if they want it. And that's again a bit more intense kind of coaching support to help them get into any sort of learning or training that they want to look for. So that's the careers information, advice and guidance kind of support. We also use technology and labour market information and obviously research to support the work we do. We've got an award-winning online CIAG service called My World of Work. You can check it out online. And that's really provides all the careers information and guidance that you could need, and young people can access this. And you can do all sorts on it. You can create your own profile. It's tools to help you with your CV. You can access job searches and course searches, and there's information about job profiles as well. There's also a My Kids Career website that we have, which is really for parents and carers, so they can access that website, and it will give them information about the labour market and what types of jobs are predicted to be available in the future. And they can then feed that back to their children and provide that support if they need it. We also have a kind of data sharing agreement with our partners across Scotland. So this includes local authorities, schools, universities, colleges, and the database that we have has got information on the status of young people aged 16 plus, and all our partners and stakeholders can access that and can put information into the database, and it means that we can identify where what's the status of young people and what's their current situation, and identify if they're maybe not in a positive destination or they need a bit of support. We can target them and provide the support that they need. In terms of work-based learning and employer engagement, Skills Development Scotland's responsible for delivering the apprenticeships in Scotland on behalf of the Scottish Government. So we administer foundation apprenticeships, which is assistance when a young person can apply for work experience with an employer while they're at school. We offer modern apprenticeships, which is your traditional kind of apprenticeship route. So that can include construction all the way to business administration. And we also administer the graduate apprenticeships, which is where a young person can work for an employer, but also attend university and achieve a degree. We have a dedicated employer engagement team in Scotland, in Skills Development Scotland as well. So that's really to just ensure the supply and demand of skills. So our team are regularly in contact with employers at the individual level and the local level and the national level. And it's really to just get information about the types of skills that employers are looking for, and we can feed that back to our young people. And then you can try and achieve that alignment of skills in the labour market. And the last thing I want to just mention is the work that we do around equality, diversity and inclusion. So we regularly conduct equality impact assessments and evidence reviews, and these inform all of our products and services. A lot of the work we do, a lot of the work I do is looking at how the career service can support those from different equality groups. This can include ethnic minorities, LGBT community, individuals with additional support needs, just trying to identify what type of support they need, and trying to give them that support and make sure that the careers services available to them, they can access that easily as well. So in Scotland, we've got we've really prioritised the careers management skills framework. So I'll talk a little bit about that. This was first published in 2012, and it kind of serves as a blueprint for the career services and the career support that we offer to our young people. We're really keen that it's not just about getting young people into jobs, it's more about giving them the skills they need to successfully manage their careers across their life. It's very much a kind of coaching approach that we take with regards to careers guidance. So there's 17 competencies that we use to help individuals successfully manage their career. You can see there that they're kind of categorised under 4 main themes. So the first theme is self, which is competencies that enable individuals to develop their sense of self within society. This can be things like helping them to develop and maintain a positive self-image, helping them to maintain a balance that's right for them in their life, learning and work roles. The strengths theme describes competencies that enable individuals to acquire and build on their strengths and to pursue rewarding learning and work opportunities. So that can include things like making sure young people are aware of their strengths, skills and achievements, and being confident, resilient, and being able to learn things when they don't go as expected. The Horizon theme describes competencies that enable individuals to visualise, plan and achieve their career aspirations throughout life. So this can include things like understanding that there's a wide variety of learning and work opportunities that they can explore, and knowing how to find and evaluate information to support their career development. And then the last theme is networks, which is the competencies that enable individuals to develop relationships and networks of support. And this can include things like helping young people to interact confidently and effectively with others, and use information and relationships to secure, create and maintain work. And when a careers advisor is supporting a young person, they keep their career management skills profile under review continuously, and obviously the focus of their coaching guidance is reflected in that. So that if the careers advisor feels like they need a bit more support around a specific theme, then they can provide that. And that CMS profile is continuously updated throughout the course of their career journey.
I'm sorry, I realised, colleagues, my audio wasn't on. I've been talking away to you and you haven't heard a word I've said. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Very quickly, what I'm saying is Jackie Hughes asked a question about NEETs in Scotland and how does it compare in England. There's been a question about primary. Benny from the Netherlands has said that we need to make room, the boomers need to make room for youth. If we don't get a chance to answer your question, we will actually come back to you afterwards and give you that information that you're asking about the NEET and primary. So very quickly, I'm conscious how time flies by. There's so much to talk about, isn't there? Let me just very briefly sort of summarise the very latest situation in terms of England. And you'll see here, I've got 3 images. I had the pleasure of actually writing a strategy for London in terms of London Ambitions, a careers offer for every young person. You can see Boris holding up the report there. But things have actually moved on, and I guess lots of the conversation that will go on in cities and indeed in towns and in rural communities is what, support is available in terms of youth transitions. So hot off the press, really, just to say that the Prime Minister has made an announcement that there will be an opportunity guarantee for every young person, a chance an apprenticeship or an in-work placement to boost the economy. Now, could you please just in the chat facility, just tell us, what do you think are the new pathways to success that are needed for young people? Just any thoughts or ideas, feel free to type in, because we really are on this cusp of having to redesign and refocus our energies on youth transitions. So Prime Minister Johnson has said that, first of all, we've got to build, which is £5 billion investment in infrastructure projects. Yesterday, in the newspapers, it was highlighted that the Treasury, our Chancellor of Exchequer, is thinking about giving all adults £500 and children £250 in vouchers to actually spend in sectors in the economy that are most at risk. This is similar to approaches in China, in Wuhan in particular, but in Taiwan and indeed in Malta, where these sorts of initiatives have taken place. There's also speculation that £32 million will be invested in the National Careers Service in England. which ministers say will allow 250,000 more people to benefit from expert careers advice. And it's brilliant in the chat. You can see short-term work experiences, ongoing access to guidance, definitely start early in primary, more help for young people who are special educational needs, are disabled. And all of this within our report, we attempt to showcase and illustrate some examples. Just also to say for our audience outside of the UK, we also had an announcement that our public employment service, the DWP, is going to double its workforce in terms of work coaches. So interested to hear how that might compare with countries outside of the UK. Lots and lots of discussion going on there in the chat facility, which is fantastic. Okay, so we've sort of looked at the latest what's happening in England and Scotland. Let's go back to the substance within our report. So first of all, there is a chapter which is all about strengthening the connections between education and indeed the world of work. Some of you will already be familiar with the OECD's PISA survey of over 600,000 15-year-olds covering 79 countries and economic areas. And basically, if we had to summarize, and forgive me if you're from the OECD joining this and have written the report, but in 2 sentences, basically what they're saying is that career aspirations have unchanged in the last 20 years. Despite all the major changes that are happening in the labour market. And actually, it is time to strengthen the connections between education and the world of work. I think secondly, in New Zealand, where we looked at a study where there were 7,700 primary and intermediate students aged 7 to 13 who drew pictures of what they would like to do when they grew up, that actually there was a very, very narrow career choices with only sort of nine jobs highlighted in the drawings. And so there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done. And in our report, we have looked across the world at evidence base around inclusion, which is close to our heart. And, you know, disparity exists in some countries such as Burundi or Guinea. You know, what we find is that more females than males are in the labour force. But in contrast, in Algeria, in Jordan, less than 25% females than males in terms of in work. And what's so depressing, when I was young and was a careers advisor in the 80s, you know, girls and women were facing barriers. And here we are in 2020, where actually the social norm in some countries does restrict, and indeed in some families does restrict access to learning and to work, and cultural bias and disability. Women are less likely to be in paid employment than men, and girls in particular, disabled young women in particular, have got major challenges that they face. So given all of that, within our report, we have a section which I'm not going to go into in any great detail around the skills that young people need in the 21st century, because many of you will know that there's a whole raft of typologies around skills, and some great work in the UK around Skills Builder, trying to get a common language around skills. Very difficult to do. But in our report, we were interested in looking at employability, entrepreneurship, and indeed employer engagement. And I'll just quickly move on from this slide, but just to say that in the report, there are 2 diagrams which really talk about critical skills. And I suppose persistence and grit are sort of one of the main skills that we see in terms of what young people face in the years ahead, as well as adaptability, resilience, curiosity. You know, when we look back to what you wanted to be when you were young, I guess you must have been curious enough to end up in the job that you're doing now. But actually looking at how social and cultural awareness can be addressed when it comes to youth transition. So I won't go into too much detail on that. And maybe also just to say on this whole skills agenda that there will be a temptation for some to call for entrepreneurship to be the solution around young people being able to create a decent livelihood. And we give you evidence within the report where actually, yes, this is an option for some young people. And particularly, it can be complex because if it's freely chosen, if it's profitable, self-employment is often linked to family businesses and who you know, not necessarily what you know. And I think we need to present this as an option, but actually be aware that for survival strategies, some people may pursue this route and actually not succeed. So where is the safety net for those? And I love work that Hillage and Pollard say, which is basically what we've got to do is to help young people think about the deployment of what they've got and how to use it. And that's what our report tries to show some examples, and indeed it does show some examples of that. So just want a few teasers now to add to the mix before we go into some examples of what's in the report in terms of other countries and what they're doing. So teaser number one is really just to say that in the UK, Saturday jobs have been in decline over the last 20 years. As young people have turned towards earning cash online rather than maybe, you know, the Saturday job of working in the hairdressers at the weekend or delivering the newspapers, all the things that I did when I was young. But the Resolution Foundation recently have identified that it's got quite serious consequences if you have no exposure to or experience of the world of work. And they highlight in the UK, there's now 3.4 million who've never actually adults had a paid job. So, you know, we've got to reframe and think about how we can get that more exposure to. So in the report, it's actually full of lots of examples, and we haven't got time to show you all of them, but you'll be able to read the report. But just to sort of give you a couple of sort of ideas of what we have in our report. I think the first thing to say is that Graeme and I have been fascinated with finding the right spaces and places for young people to access opportunities and to actually access really good information, advice, and indeed guidance. And so just to give you a few examples here, we have Let's Go to Finland. We always go to Finland first around what the Finnish are doing. But, you know, they have moved towards one-stop guidance centres. And if you look at the little diagram there on the right-hand side, you'll see health service, social service, mental health service, substance abuse service, public employment service, services for young people. Actually, the ministries in Finland have come together to actually look at how can we do fast-based services based on need, that the service can be approachable, that it's sort of one door, multi-sectoral, that young people are the expert in his or her life, and there's this kind of continuous development. Now, in the report, we give some other examples. For example, in the Netherlands, where they have learning and working desks. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. If you're from the Netherlands, you might want to put your hand up and pronounce it for us. But these are new spaces for career learning and support that are emerging at a local and regional level to provide open access to the community. And it's bringing together educational institutions, businesses, municipalities, and knowledge-based centres. Now, in contrast, in South New South Wales, Australia, the COVID-19 lockdown has triggered greater use of web-based interactive guidance tools. So you might say, well, actually, that's the same everywhere around the world. But what's interesting there is the Ministry in Education has actually set up a Teams facility where actually there's video communication between the department and careers advisors and counsellors, and webinars and chat and facilitation to bring people together in a community of online spaces. And they're gathering momentum, particularly with more personalised telephone calls for those who are at risk of dropping out. Now, in France, the Ministry of National Education and Youth has launched Nation Apprend-Not, an operation which is involving the French TV, Radio France and Arte, which is an initiative to promote distance learning and actually looking at school curricula in national and regional media. And I wanted to bring your attention to, the Royal Bank of Canada. The largest bank in Canada is investing $288 million over 10 years in something called the Future Launch Programme to help young people succeed in the emerging labour market. And I'm going to come on at the end to our recommendations around the role of private sector as well as third sector and public sector in this situation. Here in the UK, a property developer is looking at creating new kudos career hubs. This property developer is keen to create as a legacy local spaces for young people aged between 11 to 18. Again, this is something which is new, and again, the devil will be in the detail, as they say, as to how that legacy transforms. So I want to hand over quickly to Graeme to just share with you this idea of spaces and places and why we feel this is so important. And then I'm going to give you a few other examples.
Okay, thanks, Deirdre. So in the report, you can see this in the report. We've highlighted Bronfenbrenner's model of ecological influences, which is a kind of framework. We found that a really useful framework for understanding and describing the kind of influences that can have an impact on a young person when they're going through a school to work transition or trying to come up with ideas about what kind of career they want to go into. So I don't want to go into too much detail of it. You can obviously read this in the report, but just to give you a flavour of what the model is suggesting. You can see at the very core of the framework there's an individual. So in this model, the person's seen as the active agent who can affect the outside world and their career preferences. And at the individual level, the types of things that can impact on their career journey can include things like their demographics, so their age, gender, ethnicity, their educational attainment, the grades they get in school, their confidence in their career and making career decisions, or their self-efficacy, and then more personal factors such as their attitudes, motivations, interests, and their personality. And as you go outside the sphere, as you can expand out with the sphere, you can see that the next stage would be the immediate environment. So this can also have an impact on a young person's career transition and career journey. And this is called the microsystem. So this would include things like your home, family dynamics, your friends and peers, school, college and training providers and neighbourhoods. Certainly when I think back at my own career journey, my friends and my family were massive influences on where I ended up. And again, as you go outside the sphere, you can see there's different interactions happening. So there's an interaction between the different settings. So the relationship between family and school, family and friends, and then the interactions between settings that maybe don't involve the individual directly, but maybe have an indirect effect. So parents' carers' employment status, parents' carers' social circle, and the networks that they have. School and government policies can also have an impact on a young person's career journey. And then in the very last sphere, you can see that it takes into consideration the wider cultural and social context. So this includes things like the overarching cultural and attitudes, include things like the labour market and economic backdrop, so the availability of jobs when a young person is coming out of school and looking to see what their choices are, that can also have an impact as well. So it's just, so the model, the framework kind of highlights just how different aspects can interact and influence a young person, and these can happen at various different levels. And it's highlighting the importance of the spaces and places for young people to be able to, facilitate them conversations about, what kind of career they're wanting to have and what type of impact these different influences can have.
That's great, Graeme. And I think at this point, I'd really like to invite someone in the audience to speak, to just put your hand up if you'd like to say something around this notion of spaces and places. We're showing you a theoretical model. Andrew has mentioned that it looks similar to the systems framework with Patton and McMahon. It's of a similar type. And I think the message that we have within the report is that, we need taxonomies and we need theories to actually help us in terms of driving practice. But we mustn't get too carried away with theory, because actually we've got to bring about a bit of action and some change. Some people are commenting in the chat bot that some private companies have recently sort of stopped doing work in primary, because they're cutting their cloth accordingly. I think one of the key things really that we would say is that these are going to be tough times over the next 12 months for schools who are grappling with social distancing, who are grappling with catching up on the curriculum, who are cutting, in some cases, some of what might be described as non-core subjects. So employer engagement, employability, we are going to have to find new ways of actually reaching into those schools with minimum disruption. And in our report, there's an example of how a charity in London is actually have shifted towards virtual employer engagement with quite a lot of success. Again, just wanted to give anyone a chance to come in and speak to us. If you're not in the speaking mood, I'm going to crack on, but just look, that little button is there, it's poised and it's ready, and we would love it to bring someone else in just to join in the conversation. So I'm going to move on to our next slide, and I will stop once I see a hand up to speak. So look, what's needed is this shift from silos to simplicity, that we have an entitlement for all young people to have high aspirations and to be supported in their transitions. Our goal has got to be to support young people to live a healthy and a happy and a prosperous life. We need mechanisms for smoothing transitions, and that does mean sort of organisations coming together and working together. And one of the big sort of observations I have personally here in England is to see for the first time the employability sector and the careers sector coming together, facilitated through a youth movement, of which Impetus, a major charity in London, and the Youth Foundations charity, I think it's called Youth Futures Foundations charity, to bringing people together from both of these spheres to say, look, we have to speak with a common voice. And of course, an explicit and well publicised career support offer that includes an entitlement and access to good quality guidance and coaching. And Northern Ireland, for example, every young person leaving school has that entitlement. Now, mindful of time, there's a section in the report about national systems strengthening. And I wanted just to give you hot off the press CEDIFOP's latest report around the importance of being vocational. So actually these spaces and places, we've got to not just talk about build, but actually skills, but jobs. This is what young people If you're living with no money, you have to pay your rent, you're living with your parents and you want out, you know, people want jobs. And so the whole opportunity structure, I think we've got to start reframing. Here's a taxonomy if you're involved in local conversations or regional conversations to frame these discussions on youth transitions. What are we doing in terms of prevention measures? What are we doing in terms of integration measures? And what are we doing in terms of recovery measures? This taxonomy, we hope that you'll find it helpful in your practice, regardless of whether you're a policymaker or whether you're a practitioner. Benny's saying exploit the strength of weak ties. Grant, I can often struggle to say this, but Grant Navarre's work using sort of your friends of friends strategy, really, really important. Just mindful of time. Remember, 5 minutes to go. And if you want to ask a question, please use the speak button. In our report, we have shown sort of vertical and horizontal examples for youth transitions. We've consciously wanted to introduce what's going on in other countries, as well as here in the UK, because, you know, these will provide stimuli for us all. You know, in Australia, for example, the Future Ready, a student-focused national career education strategy is in place. Scotland's got its new careers strategy. Finland has actually got a very, very strong focus in the Finnish Education Evaluation Centre on transition phase between comprehensive education and upper secondary education. And we're looking also in places like Georgia, you know, where 1 in 5 Georgians still live in poverty, and actually looking at what they're doing to try and actually address that. And we're very grateful to the European Training Foundation for case studies that they provided. In the report, you'll get examples of lots of case studies. But look, the message is this: it's a swimming pool. We're going to all have to dive to the depths of our resources, forgive the pun, but we are going to have to find new ways. And we hope that our report will stimulate ideas. We have a section in there on making use of evidence to strengthen skills. And we've got lots of practical examples for you to draw upon. In our last 3 minutes of this webinar, here are, if you like, our recommendations. Public investment in infrastructure. So if Canada, the banks can do it in Canada, a major bank in Canada, then maybe there's a call for private investment to come into play here. The public investment in infrastructure here in the UK, our Prime Minister has made that announcement, but we need the spotlight kept on opportunities for young people. Third sector investment in community cohesion and engagement in youth, and again, we give you examples of that. Coordinated implementation of active labour market policies for unemployed young people, and introduction of pro-youth tax and benefit measures. Again, in the report, we give you some examples of that. Don't forget exposure to and experience of the world of work, including part-time work, perhaps for those young people who need to get an early foothold in that context. Improve access to vocational training. Government has announced traineeships here with a sort of multi-million-pound investment in traineeships now for young people. Take advantage of the new digital technologies and really look at the communication strategy. In South Africa, there's an example where they're using radio to actually reach millions of people. In your country, is government doing enough to use that media and that communications? And also, what can you do to strengthen your communications? Most importantly, to listen to the voices of young people. If you're interested in the technology side, I'm involved leading a team on LiveCareerChat, designing a bot for adults. If you want to find out more about a bot for young people, just email us. You'll get a copy of this presentation. I'll come on to the copy of the report. We'll be hosting another webinar on the 6th of September, looking at evidence and impact assessment. And hopefully there'll be lots to go at there you can sign up to our newsletter on our website. And I'm really excited to tell you that we're going to host a virtual international conference on evolving education and careers. We hope to bring together professional organisations and bodies over a 2-day and evening arrangement on the 20th and the 21st of October. If you'd like to be part of it as a participant, as a sponsor, or indeed as a contributor, then just get in touch with us. We're going to finish bang on time. No one spoke. I hope that means that you're all in listening mode. But Graeme and I, we both want to say thank you. And also, we really want to thank Education Development Trust as sponsors of the report. We want to, in particular, thank Anna and particularly Rachael as well. And we want to finish by basically drawing on the Art Williams quote, which is, "I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm telling you it's going to be worth it if we can, as a community of interest and practice, come together, have these dialogues, and create pathways to success for all young people." Both Graeme and I wish you well with your work. And if you want to talk to us once you've had a chance looking at the report, then just simply email and we'd be very glad to have a conversation. And we wish you all the best with your work. Graeme, do you want to add anything to that?
No, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks very much.
Great. Stay safe, everyone, and look after yourself during these strange times. Thank you all.